Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Marcus Reeves returned home after 16 months away, he expected dust, fences, and silence. Instead, he found a luxury suburb built on his family's land, without his consent. What began as confusion ignited into war. They stole his legacy. Now he's coming to take it back, inch by inch. I was gone for exactly 16 months. Not in prison, not in exile, just working up north in North Dakota on a municipal aquifer project. Cold air, long days, oil crews, and drill rigs on the horizon, the kind of work that pays well and numbs your brain. I kept my boots muddy and my head down, all the while knowing that once the job wrapped, I'd be heading back to what mattered most. 130 acres of old Texas soil that had been in my family since before there were traffic lights in. Austin. I'd inherited the land 10 years back from my grandfather. Dry pastures, cracked mesquite, a busted windmill, and more grasshoppers than any rational God would allow, but it was mine, legally, tax-wise, spiritually. I didn't build anything on it, not yet. Just kept it fenced, paid my dues to the county, and figured I'd make something of it once the stars lined up right. I liked knowing it was out there waiting, like a loaded gun in a locked drawer. Safe, unbothered, until it wasn't. I rolled back into Hays County on a hot Tuesday afternoon, windows down, radio low, boots on the dash. I took the long way out from the interstate just to enjoy the familiar dirt roads and faded mailbox names I used to know by heart. But something felt wrong. The terrain had changed, too symmetrical, too groomed. The mesquite had given way to imported live oaks, and the Caliche Road was now suspiciously well paved. And then I saw the sign. Welcome to Silver Oaks Reserve, Phase 2, Gated Community, Residents Only. What in the actual hell? I turned left down what used to be a 2-track access road and nearly drove off the shoulder. The entire stretch of land, as far as the tree line reached, was packed with brand new homes. Cookie-cutter, modern ranch-style builds, all stucco and stone, each one with a trimmed lawn, a discreet security camera over the garage, and, no exaggeration, private backyard pools. They glistened under the sun like a subdivision-sized mirage. This wasn't a housing development near my property. This was on my property. I pulled over onto what used to be the north fence line and stared in disbelief. There was no fence, no sign, no warning. Instead, I saw sidewalks, mailboxes, a dog park, and a community bulletin board advertising yoga classes and HOA meetings. A man in pastel golf shorts walked past me with a golden retriever, nodding politely as if I belonged there. I didn't nod back. Heart pounding, I grabbed the manila folder from my passenger seat, the one with the title deed, cadastral maps, and survey plats I'd kept like a nervous habit since the day the land became mine. Nothing had changed. My name, my coordinates, my boundaries, all still there. Black ink on parchment-colored paper. I drove slowly past a series of houses and saw kids splashing in a pool behind what should have been my old cattle enclosure. I recognized the shape of the land, the gentle dip in elevation where Grandpa used to say the rainwater settled best. Now it had a pergola. I stopped in front of what appeared to be the subdivision's clubhouse. A decorative fountain gurgled in front, and a woman in yoga pants stood under the awning drinking cucumber water. As I stepped out of my truck, she gave me a professional smile. The kind people give when they think you're about to ask for directions or an open house tour. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Whose land is this?" She looked confused for a beat. "This is Silver Oaks Reserve. It's private property. Are you here for a viewing?" "I'm here because this is my land," I said flatly. That smile tightened. "You'll need to speak with the Homeowners Association. You can't be parked here, by the way. It's resident access only." I got back in my truck without another word, drove 20 minutes to the county clerk's office in San Marcos, barely breathing. I gave the woman at the counter my lot number and name. She tapped at her keyboard, blinked at the screen, and frowned. "That's odd," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "You could say that." She pulled a printed map from a drawer dated just 2 months prior. According to it, my land had been subdivided into over 40 parcels, labeled with little rectangles and owner ID numbers, except my name was nowhere on it. That night, I sat at a diner off Ranch Road 12, staring at a plate of chicken fried steak I never touched. My boots were still dusty from Silver Oaks, and my hands hadn't stopped shaking since the clubhouse. I looked out the window and saw a Texas sunset bleeding over a horizon I no longer recognized. Someone had taken my land, built a kingdom on it, and paved over my family's legacy. And unless I did something fast, I was going to lose it all. Not because I sold it, not because I forgot it, but because someone decided I wouldn't fight back. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The next morning, I showed up at the county appraisal office with coffee in one hand and an entire binder of legal documents in the other. I wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. I asked for a private meeting with a supervisor and sat across from a man named Glenn, 50-something, tight tie, too much cologne, the type of bureaucrat who measured his usefulness in page counts. I handed over my title, my grandfather's original survey maps, the tax statements from the last decade, and the re-registration form I'd filed in 2013 when I had the land properly documented after a clerical freeze in the early 2000s. He squinted at my paperwork and then pulled up the latest property database on his computer. What he showed me made my stomach knot up. My land still existed in the official title archive, yes, but on the zoning overlay used for planning and development, it had been sliced into dozens of parcels with new ID numbers, all attributed to a development code labeled Silroa 2 Reserve, Silver, Oaks Reserve Phase 2. You see, Glenn began cautiously. It looks like this land was incorporated into the Silver Oaks expansion plan sometime last year, based on this zoning map. I cut him off. Incorporated by who? He hesitated. According to this, the zoning boundary was revised in March of last year under Planning File 1092-B, signed off by someone in the Regional Land Use Commission. Do you remember consenting to that? I stared at him. Does it look like I consented? He swallowed hard and offered me a thin smile like he already regretted the morning's meeting. I'm just telling you what the documents say. What they say, I replied slowly, and what they're supposed to say are two different things. I spent the rest of the day digging through public records, county clerk's office, zoning commission, tax assessor's archive. Over and over, my name kept showing up in the original deeds, but disappearing from every map, chart, or schematic tied to the new development. It was like someone had surgically erased me, left the title intact just enough to avoid alarm, but buried it beneath layers of bureaucratic camouflage. The more I looked, the worse it got. In one of the annexation files, I found a scanned plat map labeled New District Overlay, SIL ROA2. It was a blurry scan, clearly a faxed copy with hand-drawn lines that looked suspiciously neat. One of them ran straight through the center of my original parcel and listed the subdivided tracts under names I'd never seen. Development LLCs, holding companies, realty trusts. There was no sales agreement, no grant of easement, no lease, no eminent domain order, just a revised zoning perimeter that claimed the earth I owned had somehow, quietly, become part of a suburban golf and pool fantasy. I knew this kind of thing didn't just happen. Someone pushed it through. Someone with the right leverage and a taste for shortcuts. So I called in backup. An old colleague of mine, Georgia Flynn, was a certified federal land surveyor and had owed me a favor since we worked together near El Paso. I asked if she'd fly out, bring her gear, and give me a full forensic read of the boundary lines. She said she'd be there in 2 days. I also contacted a local audit specialist, Michael Tennyson, sharp as hell, former internal investigator for a title insurance firm. He agreed to review the paper trail. While waiting, I drove back out to the property. Only now I didn't just see houses. I saw violation after violation, markers in the wrong places, streets curving into old pasture land, power lines run across former windbreaks. And most importantly, I saw the ruins of my grandfather's old irrigation fence, sawn down at the base and left to rot in a drainage ditch. The bastards hadn't even bothered to haul it out. That night, I stayed at a cheap motel off the 35 and started organizing everything. George's flight was booked. Michael would join us with a digital scanner and his paralegal. I ordered a drone survey through a private firm to get fresh aerial footage of the parcel. Then I found something I wasn't expecting. Buried deep in the county's digital permit records was a PDF, a property transfer certificate filed under the name of an LLC called Crown Bridge Acquisition Partners. The agent who filed it was listed as Catherine L. Lawson. The same last name as the HOA president I'd met at the Silver Oaks Clubhouse, Karen Lawson. I ran a business search. Crown Bridge Acquisition was registered in Delaware, listed to a post office box, and had one listed officer, Robert T. Lawson. Karen's brother. I stared at the screen, trying to keep my hands from shaking. This wasn't just sloppiness or a mapping error. This was deliberate. Someone had forged a path through my land using shell companies, bribed or bullied the right people, and used my absence to build a million-dollar grid of lies. And they really thought I was going to walk away from it. Karen called me 2 days later. Not an email, not a legal notice. An actual call, as if we were neighbors debating fence paint instead of combatants in a hostile land seizure. Her voice was bright, almost cheerful. "Mr. Reeves, Karen Lawson here. I think it's time we had a little sit-down, don't you?" I stared at the phone for a second. "About the fact that you're living off square footage that belongs to me." A soft laugh. "Let's not be dramatic. You're clearly upset, and I'd like to offer a productive path forward." We met at the Silver Oaks Clubhouse the next afternoon. I wore jeans and a sun-bleached canvas jacket. She showed up in cream slacks and designer sunglasses that looked like they belonged on a country club ambassador. The room smelled like lemon sanitizer and stale compromise. She led me to a corner conference room with a carafe of lemon water already on the table. I didn't touch it. "Let me be frank," she said, settling into her chair like she was prepping a PowerPoint pitch. "This whole land misunderstanding has clearly caused you some stress. I want to resolve it. Cleanly. Quietly." Clean would have been asking permission before building a goddamn empire on my acreage, I said. She ignored that. "We're prepared to offer you a settlement. $800,000, tax-advantaged, immediate disbursement." I stared at her like she'd offered me a handful of coupons and a handshake. $800,000, I repeated flatly. "For 42 houses, tennis courts, pools, roads, drainage infrastructure, and a clubhouse, built without a single legal inch of permission." Her expression didn't waver. "Think of it as a win-win. You walk away compensated. We avoid the PR disaster of litigation." I leaned forward. "Karen, I was working in North Dakota when your people cut down my fence line. I didn't sell. I didn't lease. I didn't consent. What you built is sitting on stolen soil. You're not offering a solution. You're trying to pay off a robbery." Something flickered behind her eyes. The smile vanished. "You're not seeing the big picture," she said. "The residents here, they have mortgages, families. We've created a thriving community." "On land you don't own," I snapped. She exhaled slowly, then stood. I tried to be civil. "You've chosen a difficult road." "I'm very good at difficult roads," I said, standing with her. As I reached for the door, she added, "You'll be hearing from our attorneys. Make sure they spell my name right." 2 days later, I got served. The lawsuit claimed I had intentionally disrupted residential stability by trespassing, intimidating residents, and publicly defaming a lawful homeowners association. It alleged I'd interfered with development operations and threatened community harmony. They were suing me for $750,000 in damages. A video showed up online the same day. It was me, standing near the clubhouse after that first visit. I'd been arguing with one of the security contractors, telling him he had no authority to bar me from land I owned. But the video had been sliced to hell, my words cut and spliced to make me sound like a lunatic. It was framed as "angry squatter threatens suburban families." The comments were predictable. "Entitled man thinks HOA rules don't apply to him." Drunk uncle vibes. Karen handled this better than I would have. I had to laugh. If only they knew. The next day, I was pulled over outside my own property. A sheriff's deputy in mirrored sunglasses asked me to step out of the truck, said they'd received a report of a man engaging in threatening behavior near school zones. I gave him my ID and watched him radio it in, dead calm. After 15 minutes of back and forth, he let me go with a half-apologetic shrug. "They say you're stirring trouble," he said. "They built 42 houses on my land," I replied. He raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe it's time you stirred louder." That night, I called in the big guns. Julian Garcia was a federal property attorney with a reputation for going after land fraud like it owed him money. I'd met him 2 years ago at a water rights conference in Corpus Christi, and we'd bonded over tequila and mutual disgust for bureaucratic corruption. He picked up on the second ring. "Julian," I said, "I need a scorched earth kind of lawsuit. Someone trespass on your hydrology field?" "Worse," I said. "They built a goddamn gated suburb on my family ranch." There was a pause. "Tell me you have paperwork." "I have deeds, surveys, tax records, drone footage, and a goddamn fence stump with the date carved into it." He whistled. "I hope they like Civil War, because we're about to bring one." By the end of the week, Julian had filed a comprehensive complaint in Hayes County Land Court, seeking full restoration of property rights, voiding all development transactions, and demanding damages for unlawful use, trespass, destruction of historical infrastructure, and attempted fraud. A storm was coming, and this time I wasn't the one holding the umbrella. Julian didn't waste time. Within 72 hours of filing, he had a team assembled like it was a military campaign. Georgia Flynn returned with her survey equipment and 2 junior assistants. Michael Tennyson brought in a forensic paralegal and a file box that looked like it had swallowed a Staples. My kitchen table was buried in maps, tax ledgers, emails, drone photos, and witness statements from anyone within a 10-mile radius who'd ever heard of Silver Oaks Reserve. We started at sunrise every day, boots on dirt. Georgia ran new GPS scans of the property using tripods and satellite triangulation, marking boundaries with steel stakes every 50 feet. She cross-checked everything against both the original deed and the Federal Topographical Data Archive. By the 3rd day, she turned to me and said, "Your land's been violated in at least 13 structural incursions. 5 homes sit entirely over the original lot lines. 1 swimming pool is built over a capped aquifer." Michael chimed in. The Crown Bridge documents are an artful mess, filed out of sequence, multiple typographical inconsistencies. Half the notaries listed don't even exist in the Texas Register. I nodded grimly. Karen and her little fiefdom built all this on sand, and that was before we found the emails. One of Julian's subpoenas to the county clerk's office hit gold, a chain of communications between Karen Lawson, the director of development for Silver Oaks, and a mid-level planning administrator named Dennis Murray. In it, Karen repeatedly referenced streamlining the zoning overlay and ensuring no pushback from legacy owners. In one email, dated 4 months before the construction started, she wrote, "Mark Reeves is out of state and his parcel's dormant. With a little cartographic cleanup, we can reassign the grid before the next review. Dennis, your help here won't be forgotten." Attached was a scanned check, $75,000 paid to an educational nonprofit founded by Dennis's wife 3 weeks earlier. I stared at the screen until the room blurred. "This is it," Julian said. "This is enough to light up a grand jury." He filed a motion to include federal charges for wire fraud and document forgery, simultaneously notifying the Texas Land Commission and the Department of Real Estate Oversight. Within a week, Dennis Murray was placed on administrative leave. Karen, in response, hired a PR crisis manager and tried to deflect attention by holding a community unity brunch and issuing a vague public statement about bad faith claims from individuals hostile to planned growth. But the damage was done. We launched a dedicated webpage, reclaimreevesranch.com, where we posted scanned title deeds, GPS overlays, aerial maps, screenshots of Karen's emails, and a photo of my grandfather's original fence line, complete with rusted barbed wire and hand-chiseled markers dated 1951. The response was seismic. Residents from across the county started emailing me with similar horror stories, survey irregularities, inexplicable code enforcements, HOA fines for violations that didn't exist. 3 families from Silver Oaks reached out directly. 2 of them admitted they had never received full disclosures during the home purchase. One couple, the Haleys, provided a copy of their closing documents showing that their lot had been cross-registered under 2 different development permits. Julian brought them into our case as third-party claimants. We now had witnesses. Meanwhile, Silver Oaks began to crack. Contractors stopped showing up. The community Facebook group turned hostile. One resident posted a blurry photo of Karen leaving the HOA office with a banker's box and captioned it, "Queen Karen making a royal exit." But we weren't done. Not yet. Michael and Georgia dug deeper and uncovered the construction permits themselves, filed under the authority of a defunct LLC called Springtree Infrastructure Holdings, which had gone inactive 6 months before the permits were stamped. Worse, the engineer of record on several documents had died in 2019. That's when we realized the unthinkable. At least 3 homes in Silver Oaks Reserve had been built using entirely forged approvals, signed by people who no longer existed in the state registry. The electrical schematics, foundation blueprints, even the EPA runoff plans. They were all ghost paper. Julian leaned back in my kitchen chair, arms folded, looking satisfied. "They built a town on a lie," he said. "Now we burn it down." But it wasn't revenge we were chasing. It was correction, the kind that comes in the form of court orders, injunctions, asset freezes, and federal subpoenas. Julian filed a motion for emergency injunctive relief in the Hays County Land Court, requesting a halt to all sales, leases, or construction within the disputed zone until ownership was resolved. The judge, a stern woman with a reputation for zero tolerance toward land scams, signed the order within the hour. That evening, process servers hand-delivered court notices to every household in Silver Oaks Reserve. The HOA's operating account was frozen. Title companies were barred from facilitating transfers, and Karen Lawson, for the first time in her life, stopped smiling in public. I watched the sun set over my stolen land, steel stakes glinting in the fading light like the start of a siege. This wasn't over. This was war. It started with flyers, hundreds of them, slipped under doors, tacked to bulletin boards, handed out like candy at church parking lots, printed on glossy cardstock with the headline, "Who is Marcus Reeves, really?" The content was a smear campaign dressed in community concern. It painted me as a hostile outsider, accused me of attempting to destabilize our peaceful neighborhood, and even hinted that I was involved in a land fraud scheme myself, claiming that my ownership was unverified and under investigation. There was even a grainy photo of me from 10 years ago at a protest in Austin, cropped to make it look like I was yelling at a cop. Julian framed one and taped it to my fridge like a war trophy. "They're scared," he said. "That's good." But it got worse. One night, around 2 in the morning, my motion sensor lights kicked on behind the cabin I'd been using as base. I grabbed my old Winchester and stepped outside barefoot. There were tire tracks in the gravel and a half-crushed can of Bud Light at the edge of the tree line. Next morning, I found that someone had driven over 2 of Georgia's boundary stakes, bent them to hell, and left a dead raccoon nailed to a post with the note, "Go back to Dakota," taped to its neck. Julian reported it. The sheriff sent out a cruiser, but the deputy barely filled out a report. "No cameras?" he asked. "Only my eyes and my temper," I replied. He shrugged. "Could be a prank." A raccoon crucifixion doesn't feel like a prank. That week, Karen filed a formal harassment complaint against me, claimed I was creating an atmosphere of intimidation and surveillance. Her lawyers requested a temporary restraining order, barring me from stepping within 200 feet of any home in Silver Oaks. Julian laughed when he read it. "They built their homes on your land, and now they want you removed from it." At the hearing, the judge asked Karen's attorney, "Does your client realize that Mr. Reeves is the titled owner of the acreage in question?" The man coughed, adjusted his tie, and muttered something about ongoing disputes. Request denied. Meanwhile, HOA members started holding community meetings. They invited local news crews, trying to paint me as a land baron attempting to displace innocent families. A local anchorwoman tried to ambush me in front of my truck one afternoon, asking, "Don't you feel guilty?" trying to take homes from working people. I looked her straight in the lens and said, "I'm not taking their homes. I'm taking my land back." Ask the HOA where the real guilt belongs. The interview never aired, probably because Julian called their legal department the same evening and threatened a defamation suit before they even finished editing. But the weirdest moment came when one of the residents, a guy in his 50s with a tight polo and a retirement tan, approached me at the edge of the disputed lot. "You're the guy causing all this trouble," he asked, arms folded. "I'm the guy whose land you're living on." He studied me for a moment. "You really own this?" I pulled a laminated copy of the deed from my glove box and handed it to him. He read it in silence. "Huh," he muttered. "They told us the previous owner was a shell company, said it had been abandoned since the 90s. They lied." He gave me a long look. "My mortgage is fake." "Your mortgage is real," I said. "It's just attached to something that doesn't legally exist." He handed back the document without a word and walked away. By the end of the week, 5 more residents had reached out, all privately, asking what they could do. 2 said they'd already called lawyers. 1 admitted he'd stopped paying his HOA dues. Julian's response? Fracture the herd. He pushed a new motion into the case, demanding that the court force Silver Oaks to disclose every sale document, mortgage statement, and contractor permit tied to development on my land. We were building a siege wall of paper, and inside that fortress, the truth wasn't just a weapon, it was an atom bomb waiting to detonate. That weekend, as I stood on the porch drinking black coffee and staring at the subdivision carved into my family's soil, a white SUV slowed near the edge of the drive. The window rolled down. Karen was in the passenger seat, staring. No smile, no wave, just a long, hard look. I raised my mug in salute. Let them watch, let them sweat. I wasn't leaving. Court began on a Monday, but it felt like the final battle of a long war. We entered the Hayes County Land Court with 4 file boxes, a portable projector, and 2 laptops that barely fit on the plaintiff's table. Julian wore a gray suit that looked like it had cost more than most of Silver Oaks' roofs, and I followed behind him with the calm of a man carrying a loaded revolver of facts. Karen was already seated on the other side, flanked by 2 lawyers and a younger man I assumed was her PR handler. Her expression was sour, like someone forced to eat cold eggs in public. The judge, Honorable Marlene Gatwick, was known in local circles as the Guillotine. No tolerance for fluff, theatrics, or stall tactics. She opened proceedings with the efficiency of a buzzsaw, asked for initial filings, and gave each side 20 minutes for preliminary statements. Julian stood and began. He didn't roar, he didn't rant. He walked the court through a slow, devastating cascade of documents. My grandfather's original land deed from 1950, the tax records showing uninterrupted ownership, the GPS overlays, the drone photos showing the destruction of original fence lines, the zoning maps edited through Dennis Murray's login credentials. He then introduced the email between Karen and Dennis, the one with the $75,000 bribe. The courtroom air thinned like we were all sitting at altitude. When Karen's team objected, Judge Gatwick overruled with a simple, "Let it in." Then came the witnesses. First up, Georgia Flynn. She explained the boundary incursions, the fake engineering stamps, and how several pools were constructed over an aquifer cap that was never approved for disturbance. Then came the Haleys, nervous, dressed for church, but resolute. They testified that they were misled during their home purchase, never shown proper plats, and that the HOA pressured them not to ask too many questions. The final witness of the day was a notary from Williamson County who confirmed that her signature had been forged on 5 permit approvals filed by Springtree Infrastructure Holdings. Karen's lawyers scrambled, trying to claim administrative oversight and third-party contractor error. Julian responded with a quote from one of Karen's own community newsletters, where she'd claimed personal oversight of every development. Detail, the judge took notes silently. Her pen didn't stop moving for 2 hours. On day 2, things turned surgical. Julian played a recording of a phone call Karen had made to one of the land survey contractors. We had obtained it legally, through subpoena and consent of the recipient. In it, she said, "As long as the old guy stays up north, we can work around the lines. Just push the fencing back and don't leave any markers. I'll handle any questions from the county." You could hear the click of Karen's nails on her desk as she spoke. Smug, controlled, utterly damning. Karen paled in her chair. Her lawyer tried to object, claiming the call lacked full context. Julian responded by playing another clip from the same call. "It's not like Reeves is going to rise from the grave. That land's functionally abandoned." My attorney didn't even need to add commentary. He just paused the audio, looked at the judge, and let the silence say everything. By day 3, the momentum was ours. The county's own land commissioner took the stand under subpoena and admitted that Dennis Murray had bypassed 2 levels of oversight and never logged the zoning change into the state registry. Then we brought out the ace, a forensic document analyst from San Antonio who testified that several of the planning department's approval stamps were digitally altered overlays, not original ink signatures. She even pulled up metadata showing that the PDF edits had been done on a machine registered to Dennis Murray's wife's nonprofit office. At that point, Judge Gatwick stopped the testimony. She asked Karen's attorneys if they wished to continue defense arguments or move to summary judgment discussion. The room was silent for almost 10 full seconds. Karen whispered something to her lawyer. He stood. "We would like to request a recess and consider settlement options." Julian smiled like a man watching a tower fall. The judge nodded. "Recess granted. We'll resume in 72 hours. As we left the courtroom, Julian leaned in and said, "They're going to beg." Don't flinch. I didn't plan to. Not after everything they'd built was now collapsing under the weight of one simple ancient truth. You don't build an empire on someone else's land. The settlement meeting took place in a paneled room that looked like it hadn't been redecorated since the Nixon era. Karen sat across from me with a new legal team, slick suits from Houston who tried smiling like this was a real estate negotiation and not a courtroom execution. Her hands trembled when she reached for the water pitcher. Gone was the queen of the cul-de-sac. In her place sat a woman desperately trying to salvage a reputation that had already burned to the ground. Julian opened the meeting with 6 words. Our terms haven't changed. Full surrender. The silence that followed was thick enough to chew. Karen's lead counsel cleared his throat and began some rehearsed spiel about finding a path to shared resolution that preserves community stability. Julian cut him off mid-sentence with a printout of the judge's last directive and a copy of the pending federal complaint. He read the title aloud. United States versus Silver Oaks Development, et al., fraudulent misrepresentation and criminal trespass on registered private lands. That was the tone for the rest of the hour. They offered money, first $500,000, then $1.2. We refused. Then they suggested a joint venture to manage the properties. Julian looked at me. I didn't even blink. He turned back and said, "We'll see you in court." That was it. 3 days later, Judge Gatwick issued her ruling. The entirety of Parcel 18B, including all 42 homes, the clubhouse, the courts, and the surrounding roads, was ruled to be under my legal ownership. All construction performed by Silver Oaks Reserve was declared unlawful. All property titles derived from their development plan were nullified, pending new agreements with the rightful landowner. That landowner was me. Karen was indicted on 6 felony counts: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, criminal misrepresentation, unlawful development, and obstruction of justice. Dennis Murray faced similar charges, plus 2 counts of bribery and 1 count of tampering with government records. His wife's non-profit was shut down within a week. The press had a field day. The Austin Chronicle ran a front-page spread titled, "The HOA Queen Who Built a Kingdom on Stolen Dirt." CNN did a 6-minute segment featuring aerial footage of the Silver Oaks neighborhood, a dramatic voiceover, and an interview with Julian. Looking camera-ready and smug as hell, I stayed out of the spotlight, but people found me anyway. Journalists camped near the edge of my ranch gate. Bloggers dubbed me the Land Avenger. One podcaster offered me a whiskey to tell the story live. I passed. Some things deserve silence more than spectacle, but the real fireworks were in Silver Oaks itself. The HOA board dissolved within a week of the ruling. A dozen homeowners tried to sue Karen personally for damages. 3 left town entirely. One guy spray-painted "You lied to us" on the side of the now-abandoned clubhouse. And then there were the residents who reached out to me. Some begged for forgiveness. Others made offers to buy their land properly. A few asked if they could stay and rent. Julian advised caution, but I agreed to speak to each one individually. These weren't criminals. They were victims. Collateral damage from a con that had spiraled into real estate theater. I walked each lot with them, listened to their stories, looked them in the eye. Some I turned away, but most I gave new leases, fair terms, real contracts, legal ownership. One woman cried when I handed her a copy of the new deed with my signature at the bottom. She said it felt like the first time her house was actually hers. That meant more than any court win. But justice wasn't just about papers and signatures. It had to be seen. So I held an open day at the former HOA office, refurbished it into a small cafe and visitor center, painted the doors bright red, and put up a polished wood sign above the entrance. Karen's Last Stand. Underneath, in silver letters, "Built without permission. Now mine." The place serves great coffee. And I make sure every visitor sees the framed ruling on the wall just above the register. This wasn't just about taking back land. It was about reclaiming truth and making damn sure no one ever tried this again. The dust didn't settle. It shifted into something new, something mine. 6 months after the ruling, the land looked nothing like the battlefield it had been. The busted fences were gone. The stakes had been replaced with polished steel markers laser-etched with parcel numbers. The crumbling clubhouse had been renovated into a sleek welcome center with fiber internet, polished concrete floors, and a back office where I now ran leases, contracts, and maintenance. I called it Reeves Ranch Estates. The name was half branding, half middle finger. Out of the 42 homes, 23 families remained. Some had bought their land outright under new contracts. Others rented. A few were still finalizing legal cleanup from their prior mortgage holders. I handled them case by case. I wasn't trying to become a slumlord or a king, just the kind of landowner who understood that dirt, like dignity, should be protected with both hands. We added infrastructure, not the cheap HOA gimmicks, no fake waterfalls or ornamental gates. Real stuff: underground irrigation, solar roofing, private wells, a central water filtration system that drew from the Edwards Aquifer and made the coffee taste like mountain rain. My background in water engineering finally had a stage to matter. I hired veterans and tradesmen I trusted from old jobs up north, plumbers who didn't cut corners, surveyors who triple-checked lines, and lawyers. Always lawyers. Julian stayed on retainer and still wore those smug suits like body armor. We talked once a week now, mostly about expansion. We were planning Phase 2, 11 additional lots on the far east edge, where the cedar had choked out the old fence lines. I walked that stretch often, boots crunching dry underbrush, imagining what the future could look like without barbed wire or lawsuits. Karen's name still came up sometimes, mostly in news blurbs or online rants. She got 16 years, but her sentence allowed for parole after 10. I didn't care. The world had forgotten her crown, and I had built something stronger than vengeance: stability. Reeves Ranch Estates became a local anomaly, a private development outside municipal zoning, free of HOA control, and thriving on transparency. We ran it like a co-op without the meetings. No dues, just rent, respect, and written law. People noticed. A local university invited me to speak to law students about property disputes. I declined. A state senator called and asked if I'd consider consulting on a land rights bill. I agreed and told him to send it in writing. Even my old college roommate sent a postcard from Montana that just said, "Heard you're a land baron now. Do I have to call you sir?" I framed it. But the best moment came on a Sunday morning in spring. I was drinking coffee on the wraparound porch of what used to be House 16. Now mine, properly titled, insured, and remodeled. The sun was still low, bleeding gold into the dew. A boy rode past on a bike. He waved. I waved back. No drama. No cops. No courtrooms. Just the simple grace of owning what's yours, fair and square. This place used to be a lie. Now it's the most honest thing I've ever built.